Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Kvetching with Adam and Jared. I think I've lost count of the number of episodes at this point, but we are joined by a guest again. We're mixing it up. We're keeping it interesting. And our guest will introduce himself in a minute. It's part of our exploration of different university campuses series. So just to reintroduce myself, if you don't remember me, I'm Jared Tanney. I teach Jewish history at the University of North Carolina, Wilmington.
And I'm Adam Fuller, and I teach political science and Jewish studies at Youngstown State University. And I'm happy to have a great guest here today joining us.
And now our guest could let the world know who he is.
I'm Judea Pearl, and I'm a professor of computer science, and I've been a professor since 1969. So I've learned something about the mechanics of the campus and the anatomy of campuses. And my area of research is artificial intelligence, mainly causal reasoning and history of science, history of ideas. This is where I spend most of my time. I fight a lot on Twitter, and because my book is still some island of resistance of idol worshippers who don't believe in my theories, but I hope to eradicate those islands as I fight through. And I guess I'm going to talk today about extra curriculum activity of mine. I've been involved with Jewish studies and Jewish identity. I've been lecturing on this subject for the past 23 years. And I've published at least 120 op-eds on this subject, ranging from terrorism to Jewish identity, to Zionism, history of Israel, Muslims, Jewish relationships, and so forth.
And mostly in the Times of Israel, right? Is that your primary outlet?
No. I publish a lot in the Jewish Journal.
Oh, good. Okay, yeah. Well, I knew that too. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Once in a while, I send something to Times of Israel, Haaretz, and sometimes Forward.
Haaretz has never answered any of my emails. I've sent them stuff over the years, and they have never even gotten back.
Forward?
No, Haaretz.
Haaretz.
Yeah, now there are two left for me, but the Forward I published regularly when Batya Ungar Sargon was the editor. So in the Batya era, I had a good platform there, published maybe a half a dozen pieces. But since she's left, I haven't bothered with them. Jewish Journal, aside from Times of Israel, is my main site of publication. But this is terrific.
I haven't published in any of those publications, but I do once in a while publish in the Jewish Press, which is farther to the right than any of those. Yeah.
Well, this is really great that we have someone who's been teaching for so long in a field that's not related to Jewish studies, yet nevertheless has their foot in the door of the Jewish studies universe. And computer science in 1969, that's even before my Commodore 64 came out. I mean, that's a long time ago for the world of computers. But that won't be the subject of our talk tonight. Maybe if my students are watching, they'll get some tips on cheating by using artificial intelligence. I know they're always looking for that sort of thing. But our discussion tonight will focus on the problem on college campuses today, with some great insights into UCLA, which is one of the flashpoints. If I could name a dozen campuses, that one would certainly rank in the top 10, I think, of places that have problems, which are distinct from campus to campus, and which is why we're bringing on different guests from different places.
We just did one a couple of episodes back on the University of Michigan campus with the journalist there, Stacy Gittleman, that spoke about that problem. So this is the second in our series on specific campuses that have a serious anti-Semitic, anti-Zionist problem.
Yeah, so we're gonna turn the floor over to you, because obviously the insights you would bring to the table is different from what a journalist would bring to the table, since you are very much on the inside. And I know you do play a role in Jewish studies there in one way or another, right? At UCLA,
They invite me to their open house, and then they regret it. But I'm not on the faculty advisory board. And I'm not part of their teaching staff. but I've been friendly with many of their staff, so and students. So I'm familiar of what's going on there, and I'm disappointed, very disappointed about the direction in which all the centers we have lost. I'm saying the Jewish community has lost all our institutional strongholds at UCLA. We haven't got any now. Yeah, on our own.
Wow.
No institutional support that I can vouch for and tell students you should go there. You should feel comfortable there. No, there isn't any. So this is an unhappy situation. We used to have a Center for Near Eastern Study. It used to be run by a Jewish professor, Lenny was his name, and it was a nice meeting place for a variety of ideas, spectrum of ideas about the Middle East. And then it was taken over by some Susan Shlimovitz, and it turned into an anti-Israel bastion, anti-Israel center.
And how long ago was that?
Yeah, it was as early as 2003.
2003. Okay, so it's been a problem that's been
Give or
developing.
take 1 or 2 years, yeah.
So it's a problem that's been developing for several decades. I mean, I did my PhD at Berkeley, and already by the turn of the century, it was clear that there were problems there. I mean, you have people like Daniel Boyarin running the Roost, and Berkeley, ever since the 1960s has been a far left institution. So Berkeley is a great example of a school where there is anti-Semitism coming from other departments and from student activists, and Jewish studies at Berkeley is deeply complicit in it. Some universities, that's not the case, where Jewish studies is not as complicit in the problems. At other universities, the Department of Jewish Studies programs are a major problem. But it sounds like at your university, it is Jewish studies that is fueling a lot of what's going on.
Yeah, I could say that, yeah. We used to have a Department of History, which was, neutral. And then Galvin came and Petersburg, and we lost history department. Of course, David Meyer is there, and then came the Jewish Studies Center, and then we have a Nazarian Center, which should have been a bastion of strength. But I think the current administration is lukewarm toward Israel. When we talk about the Center for Israeli Study, it shouldn't be lukewarm. It should be highly warm. Yes. So I'm disappointed in this direction too. Okay, what else would you like to know?
Well, tell us the story. Go back to how it all started and how you got involved.
I think around the 2003, 4, 5, there was a skirmish in Gaza, and we had a symposium in favor. Speaking about Gaza, it's a famous symposium. I forgot the year. That's terrible. I think 2014. That later. That's when the Center for Near East Study organized this symposium, and it turned into a Munich beer party. And it turned out people are just screaming death to Israel, and you name it.
This was a panel organized by whom? Was it a panel organized by Jewish
Organized
studies
by
faculty?
Susan Shlimovitz from the Near East Study. Yeah.
Okay. Did they
On
have
the panel were Makdisi, her, and some other, perhaps even Jewish professors, but they all agreed that Hamas is was provoked. It's a great organization looking forward for peace. It was unfairly provoked, and Israel has no right to exist.
So Sarah,
They're saying that now? They're saying that now, or this was back
No,
then?
that was back in 1914, in
2014, yeah.
2014, I believe. 2014. I have to check the date. I can send you the op-ed that I wrote. It's called How Does Hamas be, How did Hamas become the darling of the West?
I think I remember seeing that. 2014 was, I think, the biggest war against Hamas up until this point, or at least during Bibi's the Bibi era. I mean, there was something every 2 years or so, but 2014 was the one that lasted the entire summer. I remember in July, going into August,
Yeah, and the outcome of that symposium was that the student newspaper, Daily Bruin, came out the next morning with a conclusion. Experts agree that Israel violated whatever, human rights. So that's the purpose of symposium like that.
What happens if you confront them with the stated goals of Hamas?
Look, you're talking here about people who have a prior idea of what Hamas is. They have a prior idea of what they want to accomplish. It doesn't matter what Hamas is or is not. They had a purpose to malign Israel.
So it's
purpose.
yeah.
Okay, so Makdisi, that's Sari, the professor Sari Makdisi. Is that the person you mentioned?
Sari Makdisi is
Yeah.
a professor here in comparative literature.
And he's a notorious anti-Semite. I mean, Carrie Nelson's book, Israel.
I don't call anybody anti-Semite.
You won't call him an anti-Semite?
No, because anti-Semite is giving them the credit of a hereditary disease. I wouldn't give them that privilege. No, they are doing it in a calculating way, and they don't deserve the name anti-Semite. No.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay, so you don't like the label for them in particular, but do you have a problem with the word anti-Semitism in general?
I have a problem. I don't use it.
Okay, what's your term of choice?
Xenophobe.
Xenophobe. Okay. Well, that's if it directly pertains to Israel, but there's a lot of, Jew haters out there who, when they malign the Jews, they don't actually bring up Israel.
Look, they can exonerate themselves by saying, we love Jews, we will go on a barricade to make sure that the Jewish students have a kosher cafeteria on campus, and we allow them to pray any time of the day, and allow them. It's not the Jews that we are hating. It's
so
just
as long as the Jews toe the line and be Jewish in the way that we approve, they don't have a problem with Jews.
They don't have a problem with Jews. As long as the Jews do not support Israel.
So they claim, but I think we've seen over
they claim, yes. And I think there is something to it. Some of them really believe in that.
Yeah.
But what about litmus tests that seem to be going on at UCLA? How do they account for that?
What litmus test?
Well, wasn't there a case where there was a student?
Yeah, there was a lady, Baida, her name was. That was about 8 years ago or so. And she was drilled by the student government to see.
Oh, right. Yeah, now I remember. Yeah.
She fits could serve in the student government, given her affiliation with the Jewish community. They didn't say Zionist, they say Jewish community. Right. That was the mistake.
Yeah.
But they say Jewish community, wow, all a TV station, how can you say that? Had she said Zionist, they would forgive her.
But even then, it's still wrong. You're subjecting the Jews to a litmus test.
Yeah, of course it's
if a
wrong.
Muslim was on there, they're not going to say, well, what's your opinion of Al-Qaeda? They're not going to say that when they're interviewing a Muslim for the...
Yeah, the idea that Zionism and Israel are central to our identity was barely touched on by the regents of the University of California. At one time, they even declared that for majority of Jewish students, Israel is part of their identity. They made a declaration like that. They then softened it under pressure and whatever, but that was as close as they got to getting the idea that Israel is a central piece in Jewish identity. From there on, things deteriorated. They don't use it as a basis for decision, for action. They don't grasp it because the people who are supposed to express it and advocate it are not doing their job. This is a job of the head of the Department of Jewish Study, that he or she will come to the administration and educate them of what is Jewish studies. And if they think that Jewish studies and Jewish history belongs in liturgy in 17th century Venice, okay, then this is what a perception of the administrators.
So the Nazarian Center for Israel Studies, that was founded relatively recently, right? In the last
The
5
Nazarian Center?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was founded more than 10 years ago.
Oh, so it's 10 years ago. So, but what was, I mean, donors, I'm assuming donors donated a lot of money for that. And if there's, I'm assuming that their politics are largely aligned with what you've been describing, the anti-Zionist line of the university.
Who, the donors?
No. The actual Israel Studies Center, the Nazarian Studies Center.
Yeah, yes.
So what is it that they...
Nazarian Center started nicely. I believe it started by Sapoznik. He was the first executive director, and then it went to.
Sorry, what's his full name? Because I'm not familiar with the professor you're talking about.
His last name is Sapoznik.
Sapoznik, okay.
Yeah, I forgot his first name. Sorry.
How do the donors feel about all this?
Very strange, very strange. I think the donors cry at night. Yeah. But they are being told that they don't have a voice because the contract says XYZ. Okay?
Yeah,
And
that is the case. Donors are in general not supposed to interfere in university politics, and they don't. I mean, my position's the endowed chair, and they certainly didn't get a say in who.
But before I forget, I wanted to tell you something about donors and about who can influence it. It's not only the donors that owns these centers. It's the community that owns it. I want to stress it because people don't get it in their mind. The community has investment in these kind of centers.
Mhm.
They both in expectation, in directing students to that centers, telling students, yes, UCLA is a good one because they have two centers. One is called Center for Jewish Studies, one is called Israel Studies. It's safe to go there, okay? This expectation that the community keeps in mind is ownership.
Yeah, I agree.
The center.
The center that I run at YSU has community members that are on our advisory committee.
Because no one organizes the community people, the community board. There's no, I can try to, but I'm isolated. They don't let me meet the board of consultants, of community, the community consulting board, okay? The only time I can have to meet them is in an open house. And then I try to meet as many as possible and ask them, aren't you Zionist? And you know what I see? I wrote an op-ed on that. I went from a person to person and I did my own survey. Okay, I asked each person, aren't you a Zionist? And I counted the number of times that person looked left and looked right and looked up to me. There's no one here when he or she told me and they said, yes, I am, but okay? It's run by fear.
Do you have any idea then?
Are run by fear. Yes.
Do you know what goes on inside their classes and what they're?
No, I don't. I never attended classes.
What are they afraid of?
Oh, look, they're their job. It's a matter of being elected to committee, being promoted. Everything depends on their relationship with the administrator. Mm-hmm. It's extremely powerful boot, I would say. Yeah. So they're afraid of that part. And everybody is in academia is afraid of being the first. Right? Maybe perhaps I'm not. But I found among my peers, I don't want to be the first. Okay? If there are 2-3 people, maybe I'll provide my name. Okay? But if there are just one, I don't want to be the first. So it's a matter of organizing them into a group of 3 or 4 to start making noise.
Well, that's why Adam and I founded the Jewish Studies Zionist Network, because we realized that Jewish studies, there are several hundred militants who fully support the anti-Zionist party line in academia out of conviction, right? This is what they believe. And there's
Fully
others,
support.
or maybe
I
to
can
advance
tell
their
you,
career, but there's others who are just going along.
I have my litmus test.
Yeah.
I have my litmus test, okay? The litmus test is, look at Yom HaAtzmaut. That's in the Israel Independence Day. I think there's no other day which offer a unity of our people, okay? And you can
It's more
count.
fun than Yom Kippur, I will say that. But yeah, go
Okay,
ahead.
you're right. Okay, Yom Kippur.
No, I'd rather celebrate Yom Ha'atzmaut than Yom
You're
Kippur.
right.
Okay, so go on. Sorry to interrupt.
So my litmus test is the number of faculty that show up on the celebration that the students run. Okay, celebration in the Bruin Walks in UCLA. Okay, they put tables, they put flags, they put stage sometimes, and they invite the Israeli consulate to speak. No, but I want to count the number of professor that shows up. That's for me is the indicator. Now, as far as the Jewish studies, I want to see the executive director show up. And I one time talked with one of them, you know his name very clearly, and I asked, why do students would appreciate seeing your presence there? It's important for them. Why don't you show up? He said, I cannot do it. I said, why? He said, because being there is making a statement which I cannot make. That was the answer. I have it written in an email.
You can name names if you want to.
What?
There's not a problem. You can say who the person is if you want
It's
to.
David Meyer.
David Myers, yeah. And just for our listeners who don't know David Myers that well, he is considered to be one of the most important people in Jewish studies today, not because of his scholarly output, but because of his position at UCLA running a program that produces a lot of graduate students. Including some very radical ones like Leora Halperin from the University of Washington, for which the donors did pull their money out because of her politics. And he publishes op-eds all the time. He tries to come off as being sympathetic to the Jewish position, but at the end of the day, he doesn't. He supports the Palestinian line full force. And he's also one of the directors of the New Israel Fund, which raises an interesting question about the intersection of politics, of activism and academia. Is he bringing this into the center? Because, I keep JSZN at a distance from my academic position. I don't bring it up in class at all. Very few of my students know that I do this. I mean, my department's aware of it, but there's no affiliation with my university whatsoever with this. So David Myers he's been in the NIF for what, about 5-6 years now? He came on relatively recently. I mean, it's been around for a very long time.
Yeah, and there are several anecdotes I can tell you, not only of David, but the entire center. Well, they had an open house just 2 weeks after the October 7th, and we didn't hear anything from the executive director. And we are standing there, people are in trauma, and we hear how great they are and how many fellows they have and how many publications they had, how great they are, but not a word about the trauma that occurred 2-3 days ago. And then I felt that some people would like to end it with uplifting participation, activity. So I gathered about 15 people to sing Hatikva. Okay? And we started singing, and I came to Sarah Stein, who is the director. I said, please join us. It will mean a lot to the students here. And he said, no. And then I got to another professor. His name it should be Michael Rothberg.
Michael Rothberg. Yeah. He's a literature professor
of Holocaust studies.
Mm-hmm.
Holocaust studies. I asked him, why don't you join us? Hatikva, with a smile. And then, no. Imagine a Jewish student going into this center, okay, and seeing 2 professors saying such a clear-cut, abruptive no. Against what is it? Is it taboo to sing Atikva in such occasion where people want to feel together?
It's
And to
recognizing
support each
Israel's
other?
right to
What?
exist. It's recognizing Israel's right to exist as an independent country, which apparently,
No. That I will say, we all recognize Israel's right to exist. They swear to you, okay, with aunt and uncles that they are all for Israel's right to exist. But, and here comes the but. The but is occupation. And all, you go here, settlement, occupation. Here's an anecdote, okay? We are talking about what the director, Sarah Stein, wrote to the students and faculty after the October 7th, okay? First of all, she said nothing of her own, but she quoted the empty statement that the chancellor issued. And then they refer them to David Meyer op-ed in the LA Times so they can get strength, okay? And you know David Meyer in the LA Times? Here's a quote from here. Bringing an end to the stranglehold of the occupation may be the best chance to break the cycle of violence. That was his reaction to the October 7th. And the Palestinians are not going to surrender their claim to self-determination. And they are not going to give up the fight against Israel's dehumanizing occupation of 56 years. Okay, so here is his conclusion for the events of October 7th. Okay? The students were directed to go there and understand the background according to David Meyer. Okay? This is a betrayal of Jewishhood, if there is such a thing. Okay. Okay, that's my anecdote for the day.
well, I mean, yeah, I mean, it's pretty, I mean, you've named 3 or 4 very prominent.
But I did organize. That was my revenge. Don't cut it off. That's very important. I organized a Hatikva. 20 or 25 people sang Hatikva despite those 2 professors, okay? Students cry when they saw people coming together with warmth and common cause. Okay? And it was a beautiful ending of an event that they did not organize, okay? In my opinion. Yeah. So this is the study of the Jewish Study Center. Okay? It's an anti-Israel bastion.
Have you talked to many Jewish students on the UCLA campus?
Yes, I am, but students are not as active as we think they should be. The students are still do not recognize their power and their clout. For instance, I'm telling you, if one student write an op-ed and saying, this is not the center I was promised. One student, if they gather 4 or 5, even greater, that will make a tremendous wave in the community and in university. But I don't find those 5 students.
Are many of the Jewish students on the left, have they been influenced by the anti-Zionist politics, or are Jewish students?
Could be. I don't meet those left. I meet only the SSI people, Students for Supporting Israel, and the Brewing for Israel, BFI, it's called, part of Hillel. Right? I meet those, and we talked, and then when we finish the meeting, everything falls apart. There's no continuation. Because the students are under the Hillel boot, okay? And the Hillel boot is a bureaucratic institute of its own kind. They need to get approval maybe from Hillel International for every activity. They have their own constraints.
Yeah, no, that's true. Hillel doesn't have the absolute freedom to do whatever they want, even though their official policy is pro-Israel.
Actually, the executive director has a total autonomy, from what I understand.
At UCLA?
Yes. Anywhere in Hillel, in Hillel's system, the executive director has full autonomy, except for few guidelines, few.
Mhm.
Like they vary widely from one Hillel chapter to another. I know some chapters which are warmly pro-Israel, like in the Bay Area, Silicon Valley. Yeah, Silicon Valley Hillel.
At
Beautiful.
at which school? At Berkeley or at
No, it's not in. It's called to. It's San Francisco State, I believe.
That campus has a lot of problems.
What?
That campus has a lot of
No,
problems.
not state. No.
Oh.
Silicon
University
Valley
of San Francisco?
Hillel. It could be Oakland. It could be in Oakland. I have to find out what university they are in.
one of the Cal States is in Oakland, I believe, but I don't know what's going on specifically there. I mean, obviously at Berkeley, there's a very big problem. I wasn't involved with Hillel at all when I was a graduate student in Berkeley, though when I did TA for Intro to Jewish Studies, first time they ever offered it for an undergraduate course, and 10 different professors came in and gave a lecture each time. There was a lot of hostility between the professors who were, mostly, card-carrying militant anti-Zionists, the Daniel Boyarin and company, and the students who were fairly, I mean, I think across the board pro-Israel. I mean, one of them was making Aliyah the day after the course ended. Like, she was literally going to the airport and then flying to Israel to live there. And they were not happy. There was a major disconnect, and I was the TA, and I was trying to kind of mediate between the whole thing. And it was not easy. Just to give you an example at Berkeley, one of the Yiddish professors there, I won't bother to name her name, but there was a service for another Yiddish professor who had died. Katz, what the hell's his first name? I forget his name. He's a very, very eminent Yiddish scholar. He didn't get tenure at Berkeley in the 60s because he was a communist. So he ended up teaching at one of the states and schools in wine country. I forget which one of the private schools there. But he came back to Berkeley after he retired, and we were at a service for him, the memorial service on campus. And she got up on stage to talk about him. Eli Katz, that's his name. He was in one of the Weinreich, the original Yiddish class back at Columbia, back in the 1940s. So she got up and she was talking about her when she was in graduate school in, quote, Zionist Palestine. That's the term that she used. And this is in 2005 or so. And I'm doing the math and I'm saying, okay, well, there is no way that she was in graduate school before 1948. So I'm assuming she means to say that she went to graduate school in Israel, but clearly she doesn't recognize Israel's right to exist. She sees Zionism as some sort of colonial ideology that took over the country and is ruling over what is legitimately the state of Palestine. I mean, I found that deeply offensive. Once I stopped and I said, what did she just say? I couldn't believe it. I mean, to actually go to that country and sponge off their resources and use their educational system and not actually recognize its right to exist, I think is completely absurd. And not only absurd, it's just wrong.
She's extreme, but there are some professors, Jewish, who will admit outright that they object to the existence of Israel. But most of them know how to wiggle their way and say, I am for Israel right to exist, but I only object to the occupation. Okay.
Now, is the occupation for them 1967 or is it 1948?
I don't know. For David Meyer, it began in 1948 by not allowing the Palestinian refugees to come in, and continued to 1967. Well, David Meyer, he's a godfather of the If Not Now movement.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he wrote an article in LA Times, I believe, how happy he is to advise his daughter to start a new movement, and that movement will change the whole outlook of Jewish youth in the U.S. and become the future of the Jewish people. Okay? So he definitely has pushed them and gave them encouragement and wrote an article on how great they are to glorify their activities. Okay, so
now, just to be clear, if not now, they are anti-Zionists, even though they won't admit it, right?
They don't admit. That's kind of, yeah, they don't admit. We
Yeah.
are pro-Israel, but we would like to have Israel the way it should be.
Yeah, but I've collected enough tweets and whatnot from If Not Now to amply demonstrate that the problem for them is 1948. It's not
The problem,
1967.
yeah,
And
yeah.
for them, Palestine will be free from the river to the sea. But, they claim, no, this will be a state for everybody and everything will be okay. The
Yeah.
Jews certainly have the right to
It's all its
self-determination.
citizens, right?
Yeah,
The guy who answered them correctly is Joe Biden. They heckled him in the campaign in 2000, his presidential campaign. Occupation. And he stopped them and said, guys, I've been in the Middle East for 40 years, and I haven't met a single Arab figure or influential public figure that is willing to accept Israel. When I find one, we'll talk about the occupation. Beautiful. He got them.
Well, I was very happy with Biden's recent speech.
Yeah, me too.
He's been very good so far. The number of times he says Israel needs to show restraint, you can count them on like 3 fingers. He's consistently pro-Israel, even as the bombing in Gaza and seemingly the ground
Oh, I
operation.
don't completely agree. I agree with Carolyn Glick's analysis on that. But I do think that his first speech was quite good. You didn't mention Iran, which was an important omission, but otherwise, I thought that he said all the other right things.
Yeah, he called Hamas for what they are and said Israel has a right to defend themselves. And God forbid, David Myers and company says the same thing. And that's where the problem comes in with people like that who claim that they're just against the occupation and that Israel has a right to exist. When things like October 7th happen, they're not there. They're not there publicly condemning Hamas, period. They won't. Right? They will chime in a few days later and say, all lives matter and, we have to have peace. And sure, Israel can go on and existing, but there has to be an immediate ceasefire. Okay, you want to talk about a ceasefire?
No, I would go even further. It's easy to condemn Hamas. It's easy because Hamas gave themselves bad names on October 7th, right?
But a lot of them still don't even do it. They're not even condemning Hamas.
But some of them will do it. It's either Hamas, but not the Palestinians.
Mm-hmm.
They are angels, and they are looking for peace, and Israel was not ready to budge.
Yeah, well, obviously, we don't know the view of each and every Palestinian, but the point is that they place all the blame on Israel, right? The Palestinians are victims, pure and simple.
Some of them condemn Hamas, and then they say, back to occupation.
Yeah,
Israel had it coming. And as Einat Wolf pointed out, why haven't any of them done anything to cooperate with, Israel trying to locate the hostages? Like they must know something, some tip that they could give to help Israel defeat Hamas, because it's in Gaza's best interest, to get a change in power. So
Adam, who is the they you're referring to here?
The Gazans. It's in their best interest.
Yeah.
I didn't get it. Who do you think has the clout to influence Hamas?
I'm not saying that they have the clout. I'm saying that the Palestinians in Gaza have this done on them, right? That Hamas got them into this, and so if you're going to separate the Hamas from the average civilian Palestinian, which of course we all do, but Einat Wolf made the good point that, all right, well, we're going to separate them. They're not the same, but nevertheless, even if they don't necessarily like Hamas, they haven't done anything to help Israel.
Right. They all jumped and danced, and they jumped and saw it as a victory.
Yeah,
right, exactly.
For them, October 7th was a victory.
Right. Even there were people who lived under the Third Reich that helped, locate and protect Jews, from the Nazis, right? How come there have not been any Palestinians that have come forward and said, I know, where the hostages are, or I have a tip as to where they might be? They've done nothing.
Well, if they're in Gaza, they'd be thrown off of a roof the next day.
That's true.
Yeah.
But I'm sure there are some informers that are risking their lives now.
Yeah, well, they failed to provide adequate intelligence on October 6th. That much is clear. But there'll be a lot of reckoning with the intelligence failure once the war is over. But again, the issue with these Jewish studies programs, and I think UCLA is a perfect example here, is always the but the occupation. And that's fine if you want to talk about it, but you can't act as if the Palestinians are just devoid of agency, and that they have done nothing to arrive at the occupation. And that's certainly irresponsible if you're actually teaching Jewish history and Israel studies. This is the fabric of the history. It didn't
The fabric is called elephant number one.
Yeah.
I call it elephant number one.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the inherent, deeply entrenched resistance of every Palestinian. I didn't say 99, every Palestinian, okay, to Israel, to the Jewish people obtaining any sovereignty in any part of Palestine. I remember it was the first pronounced by the Mufti, Haj Amin al-Husseini, in the 1936, and his words were not even the size of a postage stamp.
Yeah.
Okay? That was the idea. It has entrenched in the Palestinian national ethos since there. It did not weaken at all.
And nobody said otherwise until Arafat seemingly
even
came
Arafat.
around.
Arafat said in English, he said, yes, I recognize Israel. Yeah, but in Arabic, he said the Oslo process is only the first cut of the salami in the stage process.
Yeah, well, he made it abundantly clear with the Second Intifada that his Arabic words mattered more than saying to the English audience.
What we are talking about is evidence for my theory, right?
Yeah.
They didn't accept Barak and they didn't accept Olmert. And this is only evidence. My evidence is much stronger. Right now, get to your Department of Muslim Studies, okay? Find any professor, ask him if he agrees with the idea of 2 states for 2 people, equally legitimate and equally indigenous. No one of them would say yes. Anyone.
Yeah.
Okay? And that is a litmus test. So we're not talking about the past. We're not talking about evidence, what happens in 2008 with Olmert. No, we're talking about today's. They cannot move their lips and say equally legitimate and equally indigenous. At one point, and I can repeat this anecdote, I was speaking here in the hospital in Tarzana, and we had physicians from the hospital listening to me, and there was some discussion, and one Egyptian physician said, no. I asked him, get up. Could you please do me a favor and get up? Can you say equally indigenous without meaning it? Don't have to understand to me, just move your lips so we can say it. He couldn't say that. It's like eating treif for Orthodox Jews. Okay?
Yeah, no, there was a profound resistance on the entire academic left to even entertain the idea that Jews are
academic left. Yeah, I'm talking about the Palestinian left.
Yeah, well, them too, obviously. Yeah.
I haven't met a single Palestinian that is willing to accept Israel. Yes, Israel has a right to exist. Israel exists, fine. Arafat said so in 19XX. Who cares? But when you ask them, do you believe that Israel has a right to exist? The whole mood changes. Arafat did what you did, fine. But you, as a person, can you say that you believe that in Israel right to exist? No one will say yes. They wouldn't move their lips. They're afraid of their peers, of course.
Yeah. So, and here, I mean, there's one political scientist in Ottawa at Carleton, and she's on this big mission. She has a Palestinian collaborator, and they're going around, trying to achieve peace. But I've never heard the Palestinian on her team, say that Israel has the right to exist, that the Jews are indigenous to the Middle East, and they won't.
The Jews are a nation first. No. Any TV anchor, any educator, any imam in a mosque, okay? No public figure has ever said that, and no one is capable of saying it when you press him or her.
Yeah. And they have to start inventing or fabricating evidence or denying evidence, because the reality is that Jewish culture, its most formative moment, obviously it evolved tremendously since then, took place in ancient Israel, or at the very least ancient Judea, at some point between 2,500 and 2,000 years ago. It's absolutely undeniable. It's undeniable that the Maccabee revolt fits our modern concept of what an ethnic nationalist rebellion against oppression is, right? It was a Jewish nationalist revolt,
Yeah,
as was the Bar Kokhba revolt.
I call it Hanukkah is our trust deed to history.
Yeah, so you can forget the Bible. Who cares if any of that stuff is true or
Who
not?
cares about it? Talk about today.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we have indigeneity there, in as much as indigeneity is a legitimate academic concept, because I've got problems with the idea in general. But the point is that if the Palestinians are indigenous to the region, and I'm not willing to, I'm willing to say that yes, they are indigenous. Their culture took shape there, and their national identity formed there only 100 years ago, mind you, but they've been in the region for considerably longer, many hundreds of years, probably at least 1,500 years since the Muslim conquest of Palestine and Jerusalem. But the bottom line is, if you're going to say that's indigeneity, then you have to say that about the ancient Judeans / Israelites when they're
No, I don't go there. No. It's not the historical fight of the Maccabees that entitle us to go there. It's the fact that we celebrate Hanukkah makes us indigenous, that our mind is set there, that our role models are in that land, that our heroes are over there, that events which we celebrate occurred there, in the language that we speak, in the language there. That is what happens today, not what happened yesterday. What we have in our collective memory.
Absolutely, yeah. No, I agree fully.
That's not being indigenous, though.
That is indigenous.
It's a claim to indigeneity.
If you read Balfour explanation of why he came out with the Balfour Declaration, that was 2 years after the Balfour Declaration. In 1919, he wrote an introduction to Sokolov book, History of Zionism, and there he explained why he believes that the Jews have a right, a claim on this land. And he explained exactly that resident is a component in indigeneity. Genetic lineage is a component, but it's another component. And this is present day attachment to a piece of land. Present day attachment.
Through collective memory and theology, through collective memory and theology. It's part of Jewish literature.
It may be carried by prayers, by theology. It may be carried by culture, like celebration. It may be carried by stories, which I'm telling my son.
Yeah, but the point is, the historical record, I mean, you need to have some sort of factual basis in the past, and we do have it. We absolutely
But suppose it was invented. It didn't occur. So the story of the Maccabees never occurred. Okay, but we believe in that when we celebrate it. That's what makes us indigenous to that land. Oh, okay, you can say, so everybody can cheat, right? No, you can't.
But here we get into the problem, though. Palestinians claim they're indigenous, and then they start to cite historical events, or they pull out a quote from Herodotus that refers to the region as Palestine, and they use that as evidence that their indigeneity goes back 2,500 years. So they're actually distorting the past in order to make a claim of indigeneity that goes further back.
They cannot, in my litmus test, they cannot cheat. Because you ask Rashid Khalidi to name one poem that was written in this piece of land, that he reads to his children. None. One hero that he admires. None. One holiday that he celebrates that took place before 1920, before the Nakba. None.
Yeah. No,
That
even
is
Khalidi, Khalidi in his book, Palestinian National Identity, he admits that the national identity only came into being in the 1920s. He says so.
correct. Yeah.
So even if
yeah.
their leading historian says this, then okay, I'm willing to accept that. Before that, they defined themselves as Arabs and as Muslims and whatever else, or by clan,
Correct,
by
yeah.
family. And what makes Palestinians a distinct nation, I'm not saying there's not cultural elements as well, is the fact that in their minds they've been occupied by Jews. That's what separates them from the neighboring Arab communities. And it's what distinguishes them from, let's say, a pan-Arab identity. It's the fact that they're the ones who have, quote, been occupied by Jews since.
Correct.
Since
Their
9/11.
resistance to Zionism defines them as a nation.
Now, if your nation entirely hinges on opposition to another group, what happens when that other group disappears? What's going to happen the day after if the Jews are no longer there? They're chased into the sea and Palestine is a state. What basis do they have to form an ethno-national community if that community is grounded entirely in the hatred of another people?
It's a good question. I don't think they can survive because they don't have a national glue, a cement, a bonding force that will
Yeah.
keep them. They don't have a Hanukkah. No, I'm serious.
No, you're
The
right.
only
You're
Hanukkah
right.
they have is the Nakba.
Yeah, I mean, that's it. It's the Nakba. I mean, that's their formative moment in the same way that the destruction of the Second Temple was the formative moment for Jewish identity after ancient Israel ceased to exist, right?
Mm.
It's our Nakba, if you will, right? The destruction of the Second
Yeah,
Temple.
you're right. So it does keep people together.
Yeah,
It has the force of being a collective bond.
yeah, but Jews in exile, I mean, just to delve into history for a bit here, that wasn't the only thing that kept them together. I mean, you know, Jews were unified by a theological system that told the stories of their origins. You know, descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. We were slaves in Egypt. It was us who were slaves in Egypt. It wasn't people who called themselves Jews, right? It's an ethno-national identity, and it's always been.
They had the story of
as
what
such.
you're right. That's the story of revival and existence and sovereignty.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Sovereignty is key, right? Next year in Jerusalem means the rise of the
Not only
Davidic
that, I
monarchy.
don't get the next year because they say, okay, that's a theoretical, that spiritual. No, my grandfather prayed 3 times a day. Haman hu yolichenu b'kamiyut le'artzenu, in sovereignty to our land. 3
Yeah.
times a day. Okay.
Now, if you want to get
Possible.
into the weeds of the theology, it's fine. No Jewish state until the Messiah comes, but that doesn't mean we've severed our connection with the land, and it certainly doesn't mean we can't go back to the land. Jews have been going to the Holy Land constantly throughout the 2,000 years of exile, when they were permitted to do so by whoever was occupying. Judah Halevi, you know, the great medieval poet, you know, I reside in the West, but my heart is in the East. You know, my body is in Spain,
Correct.
my destination is in Jerusalem. I'm sure I'm just distorting all this. I mean, who picks up at 11? I told my class this the other day. In the year 1140, right, at the height of the guy's career, he's like the most popular dude in Spain at the time, right? He could probably have any woman he wants. He's a great poet, a Talmudic scholar, a doctor, and whatever else. And he picks up and he says, screw this, I'm going to go to this backwater in the desert. He goes there. It's like I told my students, it's like Led Zeppelin calling it quits after Led Zeppelin 4. They had no idea what the hell I was talking about, of course. But he went there because of his attachment to his ancestral homeland. And fine, he wasn't trying to build a state or build a third temple. And you got to keep in mind, 1140, what's going on in Jerusalem, the Crusades. It's not exactly a good time to be traveling to the Middle East. It's like going to Israel on October 8th this year, right? I mean, there's turmoil going on. But nevertheless, it demonstrates the deep attachment to a piece of land that was the ancestral homeland and state of our people, right? It's not just imagined or invented tradition, as you know, a lot of those scholars would like to have it. There is a foundational basis in reality to this. You know, Jews are just not European imperialists who came and took over someone else's land. It's an utterly absurd idea.
And
Not according to
that's what they
sociologists.
cannot.
Not according to who?
Not
I'm
according to sociologists who signed that statement that we.
Oh, they're idiots. We and if anyone hasn't watched, I recommend everyone watch our previous episode where Adam and I demonstrate that sociology is junk social science, and these morons do not understand what indigeneity means, and they certainly, you know, absolve Hamas of all crimes because they were powerless people. Right? People don't know history, and they refuse to acknowledge history. And if they look at history, they don't even have to go back 2,000 years, as you say. Go back to the 1920s. Go back to 1947, right? Go back to the UN resolution. Go back to the party line, no Jewish state anywhere in Palestine, as you said, the constant refrain of every Arab country and the Palestinians publicly, at least until the late 1980s and early 1990s, when some seem to have come around and said, well, maybe we could, talk to them now. But it's ridiculous. They deny this. And with Jewish studies at UCLA in particular, these really, hard-hitting people in our field, like David Myers and Dov Waxman, these are people with big names. If they're not even willing to, acknowledge this, if their only concern is the liberation of Palestine, if they can't say Israel has the right to exist, if they can't sing Hatikva.
No, they can't. They do say that. I don't want to say to indict them for something they do not say. Dov Waxman certainly says that I believe in the Israel right to exist, and David Meyer can say it in his own way, which is slippery. But he exonerates himself in the court of history for being lukewarm Zionist. Yes, but what they don't teach that way, and they don't give the students a feeling that they personally love Israel. That they consider it to be, I would say, a culmination of Jewish history. They don't have it in their heart.
In Waxman's defense, I do know a student who was in his class. He wasn't a student enrolled at UCLA. It was some sort of summer program. And he said that he turned in a very pro-Zionist paper and Waxman was fine with it. So at the very least, he's willing to entertain, the other side if they back up what they're saying, which is something I would do, of course, if I had a student who wanted
No, but I know a student of a PhD student of David Meyer who had to quit UCLA because David Meyer didn't want to supervise a dissertation about the topic that he chose. Okay?
Really?
And this was the rise of the Arab nationalism in Jaffa in 1905.
That's what the topic was supposed to be?
What?
So why did Myers have a problem with that?
I don't know why, because the guy was Zionist at heart. Yeah.
Well, I don't think that the role of an academic needs to be to celebrate Israel. But the problem is that they seem to see their role as an academic to impugn Israel, right?
That's correct. Yeah.
There's a middle ground that an academic should be in, right? They should be in, if they want to be impartial, which they should as an academic, they need to walk that walk.
But Jewish studies does not do that. They constantly issue statements, many authored by Myers, I think.
What does it mean impartial? Impartial between Hamas and non-Hamas? Between right and evil?
What I mean is that I teach a class on Israel. I don't walk in there saying Israel is great.
Not great, but you say Israel has the right to exist. Because if Israel does not have a right to exist, that your center has no basis for existence.
What I say is that Israel is a sovereign country, and we believe that, according to international law, sovereign nations have a right to defend themselves.
I'm a historian. I explain how and why Israel came into existence. That's what I do in my
I do that as well, of course, right? Yeah. But that is what leads up to the acceptance of sovereignty.
Yeah. But the point is that these Jewish studies scholars, if they wanted to just stay out of the fray entirely, which in this day and age is getting unacceptable given how loud the anti-Zionists are in, or Zionophobes as you like to call them, in other programs, it's a time where Jewish studies should be pushing back. Instead of pushing back, they're authoring statements that basically legitimize these really reprehensible views that other disciplines are putting forth, like anthropology.
Well, they should stand for the truth. Yeah. Right. And rather than pushing lies, an academic's job is to stand for the truth wherever the truth takes them.
Yeah, absolutely.
We know the truth is a fluid, a fluid substance. Okay? We know it even from philosophy of science. Mm-hmm. In science, the old scientists are aspiring to get the truth, but we know that the truth depends on how strongly you believe in the reliability of your instruments and here and there, and they relied on so many assumptions that it's really a collection of assumptions.
I
You
read
mentioned-
Structures of Scientific Revolution by Kuhn in graduate school. I know all about the
Yeah.
paradigm shifts.
Yeah, I had to read that also. Well, but you can't falsify Israel's right to exist. Well, at least
Right.
try to do so, right? If you
Look, Abbas doing it day and night. He goes to the United Nations Assembly, General Assembly, and say the Jews, or he demands that England rescind the Balfour Declaration. Why do you think he does it? He wants to claim that Israel does not have the right to exist.
It's
all
recognized by the United Nations. I've never heard of the United Nations rescinding a state's right to exist. Even when the Taliban took over Afghanistan, they didn't say Afghanistan doesn't have the right to exist because
But
they've got a
Israel
bunch of
is
terrorists
different.
running their country.
But Israel is different.
Yeah.
Israel has been under this threat of existential legitimization since day one. And the Arab never stopped claiming that it does have the right to exist. They never stopped it. Why do you think Arafat stopped Clinton in the lawn, in the Camp David lawn, and told him, everybody knows that the Jews didn't have a temple. Okay? Why do you think he did it? And what do you think Abbas gave the lecture in the UN and said that the Jews came from the Khazar? Why
Yeah,
did he
no,
do
I was
this?
teaching my students about the Khazar myth the other day, because if Jews are
Khazar,
descended
okay.
from the Khazars, well, they don't have
Which means
genealogical
we are
roots in that.
foreigners. Which
But
means we
these-
don't belong here. We are intruders here.
Abbas and these others are politicians, and they're not supposed to be dedicated to the truth. They could be dedicated to whatever's in their political ambitions, but academics should be dedicated to the truth. And
Yes.
there's no
Okay, but
basis.
look, academics argue whether Khazar was a historical fact or it was just a legend. They argue and argue. But if you want to hitch on the legend interpretation of the Khazarian story, then you can say Israel doesn't have a right. Israel, it never happened, and the Jews are indigenous. If you want to believe that it was historical truth, and indeed 2 million Khazarian changed or converted to Judaism in the 11th century, then the Jews are not genetically connected here. They are descendants of the Khazar.
And that's
Yeah.
been disproven. DNA studies have disproven that.
But you have to have a criterion. Is genetics a litmus test for indigeneity? I'm
No,
asking.
I absolutely don't agree. I don't think it is. I don't think it is.
Is residence, location of residence?
No, not necessarily, because we were in
I
exile
think
for
it's
2,000 years.
So Balfour came and said, no, these are components, but there's another component, state of mind. Your current state of mind makes you indigenous in a certain location. But that's terrible, right? Because every state of mind, I can cheat. No, you can't cheat. You see, the Moroccan at one time wanted to claim return to Spain because they chased us out. Okay, therefore we are returned to our homeland. It didn't work. Why? Because no Moroccan child had any emotion to Andalusia. It was just a story that we were there. He didn't have any Hanukkah.
Yeah.
That is a
And actually, you know what? I believe it was Arafat or some of the early members of the PLO. They actually did say, or it was some of the Muslim states, the Arab states. They said, "Hey, we've been out of Spain for 1,000 years. We're not claiming the right to return to Spain." And they likened that to the Jewish claim of returning to Israel.
I see. Okay.
And that's a ridiculous comparison. It's absurd because they don't claim indigeneity to Spain. They admit they came in there and took it over in 711. I mean, they're not going to deny that when the Moors came in and took over the place. So it's you're right. I mean, you are 100% right that our collective memory and our identity.
Collective memory
rooted
is
in
a
that.
component in
Yeah.
the definition of indigeneity. Yes.
Yeah.
And that's why I say equally indigenous.
Yeah.
The Palestinian
Adam's right. Adam's right about politicians. I mean, Putin, says Ukraine is not a real nation and they don't have the right to
Correct.
exist. But the bottom line is, people in Russian studies are not siding with Putin, right? They're saying this guy's a politician. He's making up crap and he's trying to take over what has been recognized as an independent country and an independent nation with an identity of its own. Unfortunately, that should be happening in Jewish studies, and it's not, right? There is this utter refusal to recognize Jewish
Okay.
indigeneity.
And I want to come back. Allow me to say it again, because it may have not penetrated deep enough to the ears of your audience, that the community has ownership over the Jewish studies program. They do have, let me give you an example. Why? If you ask for permission to open a shoe store, okay, in a certain area, then the city gives you or doesn't give you a permission on the basis of what? The need of the community. If there are already 5 shoe stores there, they'll tell you no, there's no need for that, right?
Well,
Which means
I don't know how municipal politics work, so I can't.
no, but that's the
no,
idea.
they do it on the basis of zoning, right? So this is an industrial area, this is commercial.
Could be, but if there is no need for, if there is already a shoe store there in this particular shopping center, they'll tell you there is one.
Well, they tell you that there is one for
A
the
millionaire
market.
coming today to UCLA.
They
and
tell
see-
you that there is one through the market.
Huh?
Through the market, right? So if there's too many shoe stores, then they're gonna do their business to the best ones.
No, I think even if you say, I'm going to take a risk, they tell you, no, there is already a shoe store in this shopping center. I tell you, what am I heading at? If a billionaire come today to UCLA and say, I want to donate X millions of dollars to start a Jewish study center, what will I tell him? There is already one, right?
Mhm.
Which means the existence of the Jewish study today in the UCLA prevents another donor from coming in and starting one in a totally different direction, in the direction that the community would like to. So their presence here is an obstacle for variety. Therefore, they have to comply with the community sentiment.
Yeah, but Berkeley actually found a way around that because of their Jewish Studies program. They created a new Jewish Studies Center, something about the Center for Israel and Law. I forget the exact title, but clearly it's a rival Jewish Studies program, which is far more
But
friendly.
that's what you're doing. You're creating a Jewish study, a Zionist-oriented Jewish Study Center.
Well, maybe it will be an alternative to the Association for Jewish Studies one day. That's an aspiration, but we're not based on one university or anything like that. But no, you are correct. We are trying to carve out.
These centers should not be ideological, right? So if anyone has a problem with the current center, it's only because it is ideological and wants a non-ideological one to form. So that is the problem.
No, they will claim that you are ideological and they are scholarly.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's what they want.
No offense, but they're full of shit. I mean, they're lying. It's a blatant lie. They're covering it up. That sociology statement claims they're not ideological also, but it's replete with ideology, right? They're claiming power versus powerlessness. It's innate to human nature. It's not ideology, but it is an ideological construct, the whole damn thing.
That's the whole point, yeah.
Yeah. So yes, no, I mean, Adam is right that these are not supposed to be ideologically driven centers, beyond the fact that having a Center for Israel Studies is a recognition that there is an independent state called Israel, and according to the United Nations and international law, it has the right to exist, and it has something to do with the Jewish people because it's connected to a Center for Jewish Studies, and it should not be having faculty that are publicly propagating counter narratives to this, you know, in a slippery way where they can claim plausible deniability afterwards. Right. I mean, they are being ideological.
They undermine the existence of an entity which gives them a reason to exist. It gives the center reason to exist.
There was a great article in the Jewish Review of Books about 2 weeks ago about the Association for Jewish Studies. And someone, I forget who the author was, but he went to them and he insisted that they issue a statement about October 7th. And their response is, we are an apolitical organization. We're a scholarly
I can't believe it.
We don't issue statements. So the guy started digging back and he said, hey, look, they issued a statement after the invasion of Ukraine, condemning the Russian invasion. Then he saw that they issued a statement for Black Lives in June 1920. And as we documented in our network, and I wrote an op-ed in last spring, Jewish Studies Perspectives, their quarterly magazine, published that stupid art installation called Gaza Ghetto, where they were the artist was comparing Gaza to Auschwitz. That is political, right? It's not art. And the Association for Jewish Studies entered the political fray of the conflict by allowing that publication to go forward.
No,
So
it was art, you see. It was art, a form of art.
yeah,
It
well,
has nothing to do with the politics.
yeah.
It was pure art.
Yeah. Yeah, of course, though I've never seen people tattoo names on their arm and use the word ghetto in any sort of context that isn't a reference in some
But
way.
you
or
see,
another to
what
the
you're
Holocaust.
saying is just common sense.
Yeah.
And what you're saying is also common sense. But I would like just to claim here that the community also has common sense, and community sentiment should be factored in here. It's
And-
not correct for the university to say the community is one thing and don't intervene with our scholarship. No, the community common sense is a factor you should tune to.
Especially if they raised money to endow the center in various positions in there. I mean, the community should, has the vested.
But it's more than money. It's expectation.
Yeah,
All the community wants is non-ideological Jewish education on that campus, anywhere. That's all the community cares about. They need to speak up because they're not getting what they want.
yeah. Well, that's what they need to say. I mean, I'm sure a lot of them would
David
fight.
Meyer will claim that he is a scholarship and he doesn't advocate. You are advocating. He is pure scholarly. And I know that Dov Waxman claimed exactly that. We had a discussion. He will maintain scholarly status and not get even close to advocation. I tried to sing, by the way, Hatikva in his open house. Okay, we had also 20 people singing, but he didn't sing. He said that it was okay for you to organize it. It wouldn't be okay for me to organize it because I should be representing the center, and the center is non-political. No advocacy whatsoever. So you see, they claim ownership on scholarship, on facts, and they blame us for being ideological.
Yeah, and that's the oldest trick in the book of scholars. That's what they do to delegitimize the other side. We've gone over an hour, so we violated
Good
our.
to talk to you guys. You should do it just for fun. Forget about the audience.
No, but it really has been a pleasure to talk to you about this stuff, and we're so happy that your voice is so out there. I mean, you have a massive following, and part of it's because of your academic career, and you're on Twitter, and you're really fighting back. And we need more people like you out there, because as Adam points out, we are scholars, and we have to be impartial in many respects and in many of the contexts we exist in. But you don't have to. You can go out there and you can be an activist, and you have a mass following.
I feel I'm obliged to be an activist.
Yeah. Yeah, no, you're doing a great job. Hey, look, as I said, when I started out in Jewish studies, I didn't expect to enter the realm of activism. I never had any intention of doing this. It just, I slipped into it when I saw how taken Jewish studies became with anti-Zionism in 2017. That's when I first encountered it. And I realized there's a real problem here. And then
Real
it's just gotten worse and worse. I've been screaming about it since 2017. And now at least a few hundred people are listening. But back then, I was almost a lone voice. There were maybe only a few other people in Jewish studies willing to speak out. So we thought something had to be done. So we should probably finish up our broadcast. And this has been a really lively, terrific episode. And we've really enjoyed
Thanks
talking.
for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. And keep on singing Hatikva. You go and do it. You show up at these events. Go show up at an SJP event and start singing Hatikva. Actually, no, I don't want to endanger your life in any way. That might not be the safest thing to do. But but you're right. What you're doing is very important. Because I know that there's students on campus at UCLA who are expecting more from their faculty, and they are not getting it.
Not good.
Feeling unsafe. Students are just not feeling safe, and that they have no one to turn to. Yeah, it's a big
They
problem.
should. I promised them on Friday night. I told them that we are going to start something different. We're going to start affirmative action for Israelis and for Zionist students. Affirmative or reverse discrimination.
Yeah.
on
Yeah,
our
good luck
own.
with that. I don't think that's going to actually work. Certainly not in
It's
California.
gonna work. We
It's a
have
nice idea.
leeway in our free time, and we want to devote this time, free time, to discriminate in favor of Zionist students on campus.
Quotas for Zionists.
Say it again, quota.
Quotas for Zionists.
Well, we're just a bunch of white European colonizers as far as they are concerned, who are basically white supremacists. So that's how we're seen. All right. Well, this is.
I have one last thing to
Okay,
say.
go ahead.
Am Yisrael Chai.
I'm Yisrael Chai.
Am Yisrael Chai, yeah.
I'm Yisrael Chai.
Kol עוד בלבב.
I'm not singing the whole
I
thing.
like to sing it every
I
time.
want to hear me sing.
I sang it every day in elementary school. We lined up in the gym and we sang it every morning from first grade to sixth grade. And I still can't even remember all the words. They just all kind of flow into my head as one long sentence. They didn't teach us Hebrew properly. In any case,
It's one thing at least 70% of any Jewish crowd can sing together.
yeah,
And I found it, yeah.
absolutely. Though I still think Yerushalayim Shel Zahav should be Israel's national
Could
anthem.
be, yeah.
Yeah, Hatikva is a little bit goyish. I mean, it's a Slavic melody. It was written by, it comes from that classical piece by what's his name?
Smetana.
Smetana, right? It's actually a variation on
By Moldova. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a Moldovan folk song. So
Moldovan.
I think Yerushalayim Shel Zahav is a more moving song.
It's a Basque folk song.
It's a what?
Baskian.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that.
They attacked Naomi Shemer at the end of her life for stealing the melody from a Basque folk song.
Oh, I didn't know that. Well, that's a little bit disappointing. Okay, well, the Basques don't have much clout over in the Middle East, so I don't think we really have to worry about them at this point. This is Adam, Jared, and Judea signing off. Thank you very much for a terrific
Thank you.
episode.
Thank you a lot.